3 weeks ago on October 7th, many of us came to services for Shmini Atzeret that morning. We had no idea what was unfolding in Israel. When we came to Shul, some of us thought there'd been an attack that had left 25, 30 people dead. We had no idea. By the end of that day, as we entered into Simchat Torah with tremendous heaviness and sorrow, the count was already like 500 or 600. We didn't know that the count would be 1,400 people massacred, tortured, maimed, raped, children, babies, men, women, elderly people. We had no idea what would follow in the following 3 weeks. That there would be 229, the latest count, people taken hostages, including babies and elderly people. We had no idea how this would unleash in our brothers and sisters in Israel feelings of utter vulnerability, of total panic, of existential fear, of loneliness, of a profound trauma, together with deep anger, and many of them in Israel and here, demanding revenge, cruel revenge. As time moves on and the crisis deepens, the suffering, the fear, the uncertainty, we ask, where is this going? How does it end? "360,000 reservists were mobilized, among them children of many of our friends or family members in Israel. And the rocket attacks continue to rain over Israel, and people going into safe rooms if they can. Time after time. Entire communities have been evacuated in the south of the country, around the border with Gaza. A cousin who lives in a kibbutz in the south has not been evacuated, but he said, can walk out of the kibbutz. There are tanks all over the place. 130,000 people were evacuated from the north, along the border with Lebanon. And life has been completely upended in Israel. And in Gaza, utter devastation, with bombings that have no end, thousands of civilians dead, an immense humanitarian crisis, with between 1 and 1.5 million people displaced as refugees, running away from their homes, without resources, without enough food or water, without shelter, without medical care. That's what we're seeing in the last 3 weeks. In the brutality and the pain, profound ethical dilemmas emerge regarding the conduct of war, the protection of civilians, the hostages, humanitarian aid. We've been living through this for the last 3 weeks. And it only gets more and more intense. We know that settlers in the occupied West Bank have been provoking and attacking Palestinians. We know that Palestinian Arab citizens of Israel are afraid of going to work and being in public spaces with Jews, lest they be attacked. The chief rabbis this week appealed for restraint, as media reported a spread of street attacks by Jews on members of the country's Arab minority. This is what they said: we must not be dragged into provocations and inflicting harm on people or property. The Torah of Israel grants no license for taking the law into one's hands and acting violently. And here, in our country, the conflict is being exploited by the extremes on the left and the right. More fodder for America's tribal wars. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. Islamophobia is on the rise. And horrible offensive rhetoric is being spread on social media, on the newspapers and TV. Horrible things, such as, this is what decolonization looks like after the Hamas attacks. Despicable. Or on the other side, Israel should carpet bomb Gaza and make it look like a parking lot. That's what people are saying on the extremes these days. On university and college campuses, Jewish students are being threatened and intimidated. In many academic circles, there's no willingness whatsoever to sort through the moral complexity. There's no intelligent or constructive public debate on the issues. Rather, what we see is total intellectual laziness and moral vacuity. Where does this go? How does this end? What we know is that there's a complete breaking of paradigms. What we thought was true is no longer true, and so many levels. Israel will never be the same. The Middle East will never be the same. Will there ever be peaceful coexistence? So many of us and so many in Israel and in Palestine have invested for years and years the difficult work of bridging gaps, building coexistence, looking for a better future. All that now is broken in pieces. So on this morning of Parshat Lech Lecha, we turn to the Torah to seek some guidance. Not on whether war itself is moral or immoral. We're not a pacifist tradition. But there are a couple of serious and urgent ethical dilemmas that have arisen as prominent issues on this war. And the Torah has something to say. We enter the Trianal Cycle, Parshat Lech Lecha, on chapter 14. Avraham responds to God's call, Lech Lecha, and sets out to the Aretz Asher Areka, to the land that I will show you. And together with Sarah, his wife, and his nephew Lot, the son of his deceased brother Haran, they arrived in the land of Canaan. A couple of chapters later, the Torah tells us that 5 kings who are vassals to 4 larger and more important kings on the east are beginning to revolt. And so the 4 powerful kings from the east come to the west, to Canaan, to try to suppress the revolt and reassert control over their vassals. Among the vassals is the king of Sodom. And Sodom is where Lot, Avram's nephew, has settled. A war erupts between the 4 kings from the east and the 4 vassal kings from the west. And Lot is taken captive in the war. And so we turn to page 79 in the Chumash, chapter 14 of the book of Bereshit. And at the bottom of the page, we read this piece of the narrative, verse 13. Page 79, verse 13. You can read the verse 12 before. They also took Lot, the son of Avram's brother, and his possessions, and departed, for he had settled in Sodom. Now 13. A fugitive brought the news to Avram the Hebrew, whose dwelling at the terebinths of Mamre, the Amorite, kinsman of Eshcol and Aner, these being Abram's allies. When Avram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he mustered his retainers born into his household, numbering 318, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. The Midrash, then amplified in the commentary of Sforno, says that they made a special effort to capture Lot because he was Avram's nephew. They knew that Avram was a wealthy man, and they were expecting that Avram would pay a heavy ransom for the release of his nephew. And so they specifically went and targeted Lot. Now you will notice on verse 13, on verse 12, you will notice that it says that Lot is the son of Avram's brother. Later on, it says that Lot is Avram's brother. Verse 14. Vayishma Avram ki nishba achiv. When Abraham heard that his brother had been taken captive. In times of trouble, the nephew becomes his brother. And he does everything, Abraham does everything in his power to save him as a brother. Let's continue with the reading. Verse 15. At night, he and his servants deployed against them and defeated them. And he pursued them as far as Hova, which is north of Damascus. He brought back all the possessions, and he also brought back his kinsman Lot and his possessions and the women and the rest of the people. Abraham had the option to negotiate Lot's release for a ransom, but he believes that can release him in a military operation, and so he does. He attacks at night, and secures the release of Lot and his possession, the women, and the rest of the people. All the objectives of the operation were fully achieved. Abraham, without any losses on his side, without having to pay a ransom, is able to rescue his nephew / brother. He calls him brother, or the Torah calls him brother, Lot. The 229 hostages, from babies to elderly people. Yesterday, many of us walked to 81st Street to see this amazing installation of a Shabbat table for 220 people, extending over with empty seats, and the pictures of every one of the hostages. And I want to say a big yashar koach to Shuli, who was instrumental in putting together that very impressive installation. She gathered a group of other people. There were many other institutions that supported and sent volunteers, but Shuli was the coordinator of the whole thing. And it was really, really, I could not contain I was fighting to my tears all the time that I was there. Many of us were there. I saw some of you and other members of BJ. And you get a sense of the magnitude, the empty chairs in the Shabbat table, full with chalot and wine and flowers. And you realize when you see so many empty chairs, the magnitude of 229 hostages. And you see the picture of children and older people, frail. Now this section is the paradigmatic section in the Torah that talks about something that is going to become very large, a very large issue for Jewish communities throughout the centuries, called Pidyon Shevuim, the redeeming of captives. Throughout the centuries, Jewish communities had to go through extraordinary lengths to redeem and ransom captives. Jews were being kidnapped in different countries and for different periods in order to extract from Jewish communities payment as ransom. And this issue of Pidyon Shevuim, Pidyon, redeeming, Shevuim, captives, Pidyon Shevuim, figures very prominently in the Jewish textual tradition. The Talmud calls the redeeming of captives a mitzvah rabbah, a great mitzvah, and says that captivity is worse than starvation and death. That's what the Talmud says. Worse than starvation and death. This is what the Maimonides says in the Mishneh Torah. The redemption of captives receives priority over sustaining the poor, over sustaining the poor and providing them with clothing. There is no greater mitzvah than the redemption of captives. No greater mitzvah. For a captive is among those who are hungry, thirsty, and unclothed, and is in mortal peril. If someone pays no attention to their redemption, they violate 3 negative commandments. Do not harden your heart or close your hand. Do not stand by when your neighbor is in danger, and he shall not oppress. And a person who disregards this mitzvah negates the observance of four positive commandments. You shall certainly open your hand to him, and your brother and sister shall live with you. Love your neighbor as yourself, and save those who are taken for death. And many other decrees of this nature. There is no greater mitzvah than the redemption of captives. He repeats. Rambam is a very precise and disciplined legislator and writer, and he repeats, there is no greater mitzvah. The Shulchan Aruch, later on Yosef Karo, the central code of Jewish law, takes verbatim the words of Maimonides and adds the following thing. כל רגע שמאחר לפדות השבויים, every moment that one delays unnecessarily the ransoming of captives, אחד אפשר להקדים, when one can actually do something and not have to wait, הווי כאילו שופך דמים, it is as if one were to shed blood. Every moment, Shulchan Aruch, every moment that one delays unnecessarily the ransoming of a captive, it is as if one were to shed blood. Now, is the commandment to redeem captives unrestricted? Must it be done at any cost? To what length must one go? The Mishnah, Masechet Gitin, limits the extent of this mitzvah and says captives are not redeemed for more than their monetary value for the good of the world. The Talmud explains that this limitation is for the sake of avoiding the imposition of extraordinary financial burden on the community. If the community has no limit on what they have to do in order to redeem captives, then the financial resources of the communities would be depleted. Or perhaps the Talmud says the limitation so that the kidnappers would not be encouraged to kidnap more Jews and demand even higher ransoms. Now, in spite of this, some scholars observe that even with the limitations that are inscribed in the Mishnah, Jewish communities went to great extent to redeem captives. They took this very seriously. They actually the communities made this into the greatest mitzvah. And these limitations were canceled when the captives' lives were in danger. Professor Shai Rosentzvi of Tel Aviv University, also at the Hartman Institute, writes the following. Beyond considerations and calculations of policy, we learn from the sources a kind of sensitivity that simply does not allow us to turn away from the fate of the captives. It is the great test of a community's and a nation's solidarity. Even before we get to questions of policy, the tradition demands the commitment not to turn away from the issue of captives and not to abandon it even for a moment. 229 hostages in Gaza. What is being done? What will be done to bring them home safely? Will this remain in the front, at the top of the priorities, as the greatest mitzvah to bring them home? I want you to turn to page now to the beginning of chapter 15. That's on page 82. The war is over. Avram comes back with Lot. And then it says, sometimes later, Achar advarim ha'ele, the word of Adonai came to Avram in a vision. He said, fear not, Avram. I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great. The commentators say, fear not? Why would Avram be afraid? He has just been victorious in a military operation. He succeeded in rescuing his nephew Lot and other captives with all their possessions. Fear not? Why would Avram be afraid? And the Midrash answers, Rabbi Levi said, our forefather Avram was fearful and saying, perhaps those people whom I killed, there was among them one righteous person, one pious person. This is what Avram's that's why he's afraid. He's afraid lest he killed somebody who is pious and righteous and innocent. The expression of concern for the death of thousands of Palestinian civilians, for the wretched condition of the millions of Palestinian refugees, is in some circles considered to be an act of betrayal. can't say it. One feels one has to be careful, lest an expression of anguish and heartbreak at the sight of Palestinians fleeing bombings in despair and asking for the avoidance as much as possible of further suffering of innocent people be misinterpreted. As if saying that one cares for the life of Palestinians detracts in any way from the barbarity and the depravity of Hamas's crimes. As if acknowledging the suffering of human beings who are trapped in this conflict means accepting that Hamas is a legitimate liberation movement or is performing a legitimate act of resistance against Israel. Of course it is not. This is pure evil. As if saying that one cares for the fate of Palestinians and one hopes and prays and demands that everything be done to keep as many people safe and alive, invalidates Israel's right to defend itself against a ruthless enemy and its right to strike back. Nothing justifies Hamas, nothing. And nothing justifies ignoring the suffering of innocent human beings, half of them children. We don't know where this war is going. Abraham had the fear that one person may have been killed in his rescue of Lot. One person, and he was afraid. How much more so when we're talking about millions of people? We don't know where this war is going. How many more will die? What the day after will look like. When the war ends, hopefully soon, the task of rebuilding will be immense, immense. And we will have a responsibility, and hopefully we will embrace our commitment to support that rebuilding for our brothers and sisters in Israel. The material and physical recovery will be nothing compared to the task of emotional recovery from this trauma. Israelis and Palestinians, now angry, afraid, depleted, broken, will still be neighbors. How will they go forward from there? And there too we will have a responsibility, and hopefully we will embrace our commitment to try to figure out how we will go and they will go from there. In the meantime, 229 hostages are waiting to be liberated and return to their homes in safety. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are in severe danger. We pray that God will watch over them and give them strength and hope. We pray that the brutality and devastation we're witnessing will lead to a breakthrough. And although it seems so far away, one day we pray that God's will for goodness and peace will finally prevail. Shabbat Shalom.